Okay, so a very warm welcome to you all. I'm not sure what the weather's like with you. It's not too great in Swansea this afternoon, if I'm honest. This event is to launch the new research from Tyfu Tai Cymru on the experience of local government housing professionals during the COVID-19 pandemic. We've got two excellent speakers today, and the format will be that I will ask the two speakers to speak first, and then we will go to questions after you've heard from both of them. So my name is Andrea Lewis. I'm the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Service Transformation and Joint Deputy Leader for Swansea Council. My portfolio encompasses housing, and I'm also the WLGA lead spokesperson for housing in Wales. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Catherine May, who is Tyfu Tai Cymru manager, and Catherine is going to take us through the report. So over to you, Catherine.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you very much, Andrea. I'm just going to be putting my PowerPoint slides up. Oops. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that working?
Yes,
okay?
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so just to say thank you for coming today, taking time out to listen to us. I'm going to keep my presentation as brief as I can because we're keen to hear from Jodie and from others attending about what their experiences has been like, reflections on working in a pandemic in their housing department. So a quick introduction to Tyfu Tai. We're a 5-year research and policy project funded by Oak Foundation and based within the Chartered Institute of Housing, the membership body for housing professionals. Oh, just trying to. Our previous reports include perceptions of housing, social housing and homelessness, the allocations of social housing, solutions to empty homes, private rented support sector and support for tenants with mental health problems, local government reform and partnerships between housing, health and social care. This webinar is the first of 3. Next week, we're launching our report into hospital discharge processes and the role housing plays. And in 2 weeks, we're hosting presentations into the support that has been available to the private rented sector through and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. Both these events are on our website, free to attend. And now that my little plug is over, I'll move on to today's presentation. So, joining the dots 1 and 2. We first contacted local government staff in January 2020 to ask them about their experiences. They told us they were proud to work in housing, that they felt there was a strong commitment to ending homelessness, and that they also felt the pressure of finding enough housing, of low budgets, and struggles to build partnerships beyond their departments. Little did any of us know then what was on the horizon in February 2020. Housing professionals across Wales have been at the front line of delivering Welsh Government pledges to keep everyone safe and at home, and undoubtedly their work has prevented many more becoming ill and further lives being lost. Having gained a snapshot into their lives at that point in time, we wanted to go back and ask staff how they were feeling, what had changed, and what they see as the opportunities for the future. The most obvious change has been to staff taking on new responsibilities. In some cases, people have become overnight leaders in their departments. The move to work from home for many staff, although not all, but for many, was delivered under incredible speed. Staff told us that they thought the lesson about changing working practices was one that should be carried forward. But over and above, people told us that they felt their local authority had done well in providing temporary accommodation to people experiencing homelessness, that the urgency of the pandemic combined with a joint willingness to deliver support when needed, while at times overlooking bureaucracy, was a huge achievement that might have been unimaginable a few months previously. We also asked what lessons should be learned. And there are some really good quotes from this section that I wanted to draw on to really kind of bring some of our findings alive. So people told us homelessness issues cannot be resolved by housing services in isolation, that we need to consider the equality implications from changes to service provision, that it's a struggle to do the day job while also taking on COVID responsibilities. And for many staff, that they're having to take on homeschooling of their children while delivering on their jobs was an experience they could not have anticipated. One area I did want to touch on that I thought was a really interesting area was that in our first survey, the issue of budgets was raised as a real concern for staff on delivering on priorities with regard to housing. But when we went back and asked the staff the question about what would make your role easier, budget wasn't really brought up in the same way. But people did talk about the pressure they were under to hit Welsh Government deadlines and the need for better technology. An ongoing theme in both surveys was the need for more affordable housing. And as the new Senedd has set out their objectives, that is a message that is being heard with a target of 20,000 homes. But we need to make sure there is an understanding of how those targets will be reached. When we asked if people thought that their local authority's ability to deliver new homes had decreased, nearly half thought it had, but 80% highlighted the need for more land and resources. The urgency of this priority is underlined by an overriding need to find permanent housing solutions for people currently in temporary accommodation, including single-person accommodation. We need to not lose the gains that have been made by housing people in such high numbers in such a short period of time. Another area I thought I would just focus on in this presentation was that of staff wellbeing. The staff were at the heart of this piece of work, the people working in housing departments in local authorities throughout Wales. Our first question, both times, was about motivation at work. 49% of people told us that they were motivated by helping others, 29% by being part of a team, and 19% by being part of the housing sectors. Not many sectors can claim that level of dedication to serving communities. Am I still here? Yeah, is it still, sorry, it wasn't showing that it was sharing anymore. So what's changed? Well, when we asked staff where they needed help, a third of staff felt they needed support with their mental health, 41% due to work pressures and 26% due to the work environment. It was rewarding to see that 87% felt supported by their local authority and their manager. That's an incredible number to have at this particular point in time. But we need for them to stay engaged, that we should be sure that we're prioritising communication with staff to acknowledge the pressures that individuals are under. For some staff, they want to continue working from home with flexibilities. For others, the consideration of a part-time return to the office would benefit their mental health. At least be sure that we're having these conversations. So important. So finally, what's changed? Well, I've talked about the working from home, the increased responsibility, the pride in what's been achieved. But we asked people about their view of whether their local authorities can reduce homelessness. In January 2020, 50% showed support for good or very good. This had increased to 61% on repeating the survey, an 11% increase in positive perception. This increase in positive view was also reflected by responses to the questions about collaboration within their local authority to deliver more housing. In January, that had 58% positive responses. That had increased to 67% by December. Partnerships with health remain a frustrating area for some staff. While some evidence there are the new ways of working that have been developed during the pandemic, for others it feels like an ongoing issue where we haven't yet managed to really bring about change. Some of the issues people talked about was the sense that people are being bounced between services, late notification of hospital discharge, and 1 in 4 respondents to our survey saying they have no confidence in partnerships between housing and health. I'm going to end here. The links to our report are in the chat and on our website. I hope you found this interesting. Do stay in touch, and I'll hand back to Andrea now.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So before we go to questions, we're going to go to our next speaker and hear a little bit more about the personal experience on the ground from Jodie Davis, who is Housing Strategy Manager for Conwy County Borough Council. Over to you, Jodie.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this event and share Conwy Housing Strategy's experience of working during the pandemic. So as Andrea says, I'm Jodie Davis and I work for Conwy County Borough Council as the Housing Strategy Manager. I've worked for Conwy for just over 2 years now, and I manage a small, diverse team of 6 And those roles include housing strategy, affordable housing development, and empty homes. So what did we do well over the pandemic? Well, similar to all organisations, I think that we moved very quickly from working in the office to working at home. Conway had already been working towards remote working and hot desking, so the IT was already set up. We all had access to our laptops. We all had access to the remote internet, internal network, Skype facilities. So regardless of our location, we could answer phone calls. I think our biggest challenge was the fact that now that was mandatory and that people had no option but to work from home. And I think it's fair to say that a couple of other officers in my team had never worked from home, and they were worried about losing the office environment. So being away from colleagues, losing that office chat, and also learning from others, because you pick up accidental information when you're listening to others within the office. So how did we overcome this? Well, what we found is that regular, clear and open communication has been key to supporting officers. And we put a number of things in place so that staff didn't feel isolated and they didn't feel worried about working at home. So, for example, we had weekly informal meetings, and these were Monday morning coffee and chat sessions, which were just half an hour team meetings. We wouldn't talk about work. We would talk about what did we do over the weekend, what did we have on for the week. You know, sometimes those kind of conversations did happen, but it was an opportunity to have those informal conversations like you would normally have on a Monday morning when you're coming in, putting your coat on the peg and making a coffee. So yeah, that really helped the team. We also made use of the Skype facilities, so there was instant messaging. So every now and again during the day, a message would pop up for the whole team saying, "Oh, time for a break now, going downstairs for a coffee," or reflect on an email that had come through. And we made use quite a lot of the instant messaging, and we still do. What we did find, though, is that it was still important to have those formal team meetings, which we already had in the calendar every 6 weeks, and that was to formalise the feedback. So sometimes we had to make sure that in order so that we could reflect back on what everybody else is doing within not just our team, but the wider housing services and the wider council, we felt that the 6 weekly formal meetings still had to be in place as well. And that just allowed us to share other communications. What we found was that Conway's Chief Executive Officer was brilliant. He shared weekly COVID updates, and he also shared reassuring messages to staff, and that covered wellbeing matters such as encouraging staff to use their flexi, taking regular breaks, taking their holidays, and this was really valued by everybody, not just within my team, but the wider housing services and the wider council as well. The Chief Executive Officer also told us that we should stop doing our PDRs, and this should be replaced with regular catch-ups. So that's what we did. We did have monthly one-to-one meetings with everybody in the team, and that was to discuss work, well-being, and also to catch up on matters that didn't relate to work, and just to have that conversation one-to-one. It's important to know as well, we also had a team WhatsApp group, and that's been really valuable for our team, because sometimes working at home, you can get connection issues, and the team valued that WhatsApp group. So if somebody was having problems in the morning, we'd get a message to say, "I am here, I'm just struggling to get on today." Or if you knocked off during the day, "I am here, but I've been knocked off. Is anybody else having these problems?" And it was just another way of keeping in contact with one another that was outside of the official network. In addition to our team catch-ups, we also had a housing services meeting, which covered everybody within the service. And we had some really positive feedback from that. We did encourage staff to feedback what their thoughts were on the meeting, and also how can we improve for the future. So during that meeting, all the section managers gave an update as to what they were doing within their departments. one of the feedback that we did have was that staff didn't know when other members of staff were leaving, or equally when there was a new starter. So that suggestion has now been implemented. We now get a weekly or monthly, depending on what the turnover's like, email to tell us who's started or who's left. And that was purely because we physically couldn't see people anymore. There were times that people had left and we didn't know about it, or people had started and we didn't know. I think it's fair to say that during the pandemic, we did have staff within my team that felt guilty that they weren't part of the frontline services and helping homeless clients, and guilty for more or less doing business as usual. But in reality, they were helping. I had officers taking on additional duties from other teams, from covering the telephones to paying invoices to organising bunker bins, which were the temporary housing units we were using. And we also had a couple of members of the team taking part in the track and trace and protect. But it is fair to say as well that the business as usual tasks did help with accommodating homeless clients as well. For example, the Empty Homes officer was successful in claiming 500,000 in Welsh Government Phase 2 money, which will eventually deliver 21 new units of single accommodation in the greatest areas of demand. So it was really important to make sure that everybody reflected on the work that they were doing. And although that they weren't those frontline homeless officers, we were still playing a really big part in what the overall housing services was doing. So as a manager, wellbeing was important for me in ensuring that staff were taking their leave, using the flexi time, and also moving during the day, because that's one thing that we did miss, and I think we're all guilty of, is that you can be sat by your computer all day, and sometimes especially during the winter months, you're not getting outside. The team were also reminded to regularly think about their desk assessments and the workstation setups. So as I mentioned before, we regularly talked about wellbeing desk assessments during our catch-up meetings. One of the things that we did do, though, is because we did feel that staff needed a bit of encouragement during the winter months, we did set up some team challenges as well. So and that was to encourage staff to go out during the daylight hours and to move during the day. So one of our challenges that we had was to cover the miles of Conway to Cardiff. So we walked the equivalent of Conway to Cardiff, taking the longest route, not the easy route. And we fed back weekly how many miles that we'd covered during the week. Sometimes we found that staff, so once that challenge was ended, we thought, well, what can we do now? How can we keep everybody still motivated? So we began an alphabet challenge, which meant that every day you'd have to go out during the day and find an object that began with the letter of the day. So we started obviously with A, B, and went through the alphabet for 26 days. 26 days. I would say that the team have adapted really well to working from home, and I do have their permission to say that they are, and they do welcome the new ways of working now. They especially like the use of the virtual meetings, because we've all felt that whichever meeting that we've gone to, that there is always better attendance, there is no need to travel, and as a result, we're getting better engagement and better partnership working. As we move forward, we are still under immense pressure, and my team would agree and echo the Tyfu Tai report findings that increased resources, better Welsh Government deadlines and more affordable housing would make our role easier. So how are we dealing with the pressures at the moment? Well, at the moment, we continue to ensure that we have good communication, not just within our own team, but housing services as a whole and with partner agencies. We are continuing to work in partnership. As I mentioned before, virtual meetings have helped us to manage our time and to engage with various work streams. We're maximising resources, developing new initiatives. I mentioned the Empty Homes initiative that the Empty Homes officer set up, and we're still looking for more new initiatives as well. And most importantly, I think we're supporting each other and to keep reflecting on the work that we're doing and the positive achievements that we are doing and achieving. And there's been a lot of good, positive work that we have done. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jodie. And I think everybody attending today will join me in thanking you both. We're going to open things up for questions and also observations, any comments, and any experience you would like to share today. So what I would ask is if you can indicate by raising your hand, and also if you can say who you are and which organisation that you represent. So I know you're all looking very shy at the moment. Who wants to go first? Okay, so is there anybody that has read the report and things are chiming with you and you agree with the report? Okay, I'll go to Mark Wade.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, just to thank colleagues for contributions, really, and most definitely, certainly in the south of the country, we recognise lots of things that have been mentioned by Jodie there, for example, from the workforce perspective. But yeah, in general, very much so. Yes, lots and lots of huge challenges really for the sector coming out to the last. I keep saying 12 months, but it's more like 15 or 16 now, isn't it? But also lots of positives as well, and I think there are, the workforce side of things that you've covered, Jodie, was really interesting. But the multi-agency partnership working, the just get it done mentality, I think has been really positive. Challenge now probably is to try and keep that up at a time where I'm sure there's going to be financial challenges for us as well, really. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for contributions, really, and yes, definitely chimed, as you said, Andrew.
Thank you, Mark. Do either of you want to respond, or shall I move on to our next questioner?
No, I mean, I was just going to say that was, really interesting, Mark. Thank you for kind of contributing. And I think you're right that we talked about the fact that budget had become less of a problem for people, less of an issue. But is that going to stay the same? Actually, is that a lesson to be learned about, where our priorities lie when it comes to delivering on new homes? I think there's a lot to be thinking about, and thank you for that.
Thanks, Catherine. So over to you, Sue.
Hi, yeah, my name's Sue Brooks. I'm from Naworth Housing Association in Cardiff. I just wanted to say to Jodie, I think we one of the things here, it was like everybody else, was the sort of sudden isolation of people from the office, especially those that live alone, also now working alone. But some of the things you were saying about your alphabet challenge, I think I might pinch that idea and put it forward. But we did things similar. We've created a newsletter, and we put competitions in there with little prizes, and then we did competitions outside of that to keep everyone in touch. And we had water cooler moments by Teams meetings and that sort of thing. So I think, yeah, it's just ensuring that people still do feel connected to their colleagues, which it was quite difficult in the trying times, but we do our best. But yeah, I think really just to say thanks for the presentation, and it is sort of sector wide, if you like, and it's interesting to see how other people what they've done to try and keep their staff in touch with each other. So thanks for that. And that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Do you want to respond to Sue's comments?
No, just thanks for that, Sue. One of the things that we did find, though, like you say, some officers do live at home, and when rules allowed, when the restrictions were eased slightly, we did try walk-in meetings as well, one-to-one walk-in meetings outside, which also went down very well.
If I can't see any questioners at this point, but Jodie, if I can sort of expand on that. Obviously, you've seen the challenge and you've come up with some very innovative ideas. How would you think would be the best way to perhaps share some good practice, particularly in tackling staff isolation?
I think it's communication is key, isn't it? And I think that one of the things that I've missed quite a lot is the networking opportunities, because the amount of meetings that we used to attend and just network with one another, not just to learn about how we operate as managers, but also how we work within the sector. And I think there's still loads of opportunities to network. I know it's in a virtual world, and sometimes it can be slightly more awkward when you're in a virtual world doing the networking, because it's not that one-to-one, but make use of any networking opportunities. Just recently attended the TAI conference, and there was lots of opportunities there to sit on a virtual table with somebody and have a conversation. And it's using those platforms, isn't it, to have those conversations with others and to continue learning from others.
Thanks, Jodie. One thing that has particularly struck me, particularly during this pandemic, is the excellent partnership working that we've seen. And I know, Catherine, the report has revealed that. I'm just wondering if, and I'll put it out perhaps to the audience, does anybody have any thoughts as to how we can continue that excellent partnership working? Because I feel the last thing we need to do is go backwards actually from that. And there are some positives which have certainly come out of working under very challenging circumstances. And actually, we've all come together and really risen to meet that challenge, not just local authorities, but in partnership with housing associations and third sector particularly. I'm just wondering if anybody's got any views on that. Perhaps you've got positive experiences of the partnership working on the ground in your local areas, or did you have a negative experience? I'll put it out to the audience. Anyone want to highlight or speak on that? Janice?
Hi, I work for United Welsh, and I had some really amazing experience with the local authority in Cardiff. The proactivity was awesome. I think probably a lot of people in the local authority, as probably everywhere else, worked their socks off. So I think probably the hours that people put in were phenomenal. So the amount of people having to get people off the streets, and we worked in partnership to change building use and all that sort of thing, and it was just absolutely amazing. I guess we had more resources in the way of money and opportunity, but it's good to keep that momentum going. And the meeting online, Teams meetings worked really well and been really effective. And I hope that sort of flexibility about how people work will carry on for other organisations. It certainly will for us. And it's going to be a hybrid sort of thing, isn't it? Sort of maybe office space if you need it, and working at home if that's what works for you. And I hope that does continue for everybody. But I had an amazing experience, and I was so impressed with our local authority. Cardiff and Caerphilly, we also work in Caerphilly quite a lot as well. So yeah, well done to all local authority colleagues, really.
Thanks, Janice. I'm not sure if Catherine and Jodie want to respond to that.
Yeah, just totally to agree with Janice, really. And one thing that did come out from some of the comments of the report was that feeling that maybe housing staff don't feel, that they've always had that recognised, that the work that they have done and what they have achieved. And, everybody's been pushed to unexpected limits really during this time. But I think that's right, that it's really important that people feel that that's rewarded. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to go back and talk to people, to kind of say, look, we're here, we're listening to what you're saying, and how has it been for you? And, absolutely, as Janice said, incredible work. And it goes to show what we can do when some of the limitations perhaps that were there before are lifted. And but I think it's also important to recognise where those limitations are useful, and just make sure that we're taking the best of what's happened forward, I suppose, is what we all want to do, isn't it, really? And I suppose, Andrea, turning the tables a little bit, it'd be interesting to hear from you about your experience working within your role, about if you've seen some of this partnership coming together as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've got our head of housing as well on the call, Mark Wade, today. And I think Mark will agree that it's been a fantastic response, a tremendous response. And people working long hours. It's been challenging because we've had quite a high number of people in temporary accommodation. And I know the report touches on this, and Jodie certainly highlighted it as well. What would make the job easier is more affordable housing, and that's definitely come to the forefront. We don't ideally want to put people in temporary accommodation. We'd rather have that affordable housing available to put people into more permanent housing solutions as soon as possible. And I think that's the thing for me now, focusing going forward, is working with Welsh Government. And I think there's room for local authorities and housing associations and the private sector to fill that role, to make sure that we've got the homes available so that we can help deal with this. And also, I think one of the things which goes unrecognised is that tremendous amount of early intervention and prevention that happens through councils and with housing supporting people. It's often something that goes under the radar, is not particularly visible. But I think we also need to give recognition to local authorities in terms of the high percentage of people that they've prevented from becoming homelessness. And that's a really critical element for me as well. Okay, we've got Karen Welsh.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much. Firstly, thanks for putting this on today. I think this is a great opportunity to hear how others are working in our sort of niched area. But I work in a housing association on the south coast, so I haven't got the Welsh accent that a lot of people have got. But certainly, thank you, Jodie, for sharing some of the ideas you did as your team. Just to say, and whether people want to pick up on a couple that we did, we missed out on our team Christmas lunch, and I think this is something that we're all struggling with. Is something we were always used to being as part of a team in an office space, and suddenly how do you manage your teams all remotely? So we didn't have our Christmas meal as we would do and share it at Christmas time, but the budget was held over, and we came up with an idea of how we can do something, albeit in our own homes. So we've got a team in Somerset as well as a team in Dorset, and we managed to arrange that a local restaurant or a bakery prepared individual cream teas, high teas, and they were taken to staff's houses. And then we shared our nice lunch and also played a game called Hoi Bingo, which has really took off. And every time now we have a team meeting, we'll have one or two games of that, and it just lightens the mood. It really brings people together, which I think is really good. And so we've had a team meeting this morning, and it's still happening. So the cream tea went down very well, and also the Hoi Bingo has been there for ever since that occasion. Also, picking up a couple of things that Jodie said about staff and the communication, the sort of issues we've encountered during the time. Starters and leavers, that regularly gets mentioned at our organisation. We don't hear when people have started, or we don't hear that people who we've been working with have left the organisation, and perhaps we're still waiting for responses from emails and didn't hear about that. So that's not that seems to be across a lot of organisations, the communication type thing. I do recall way back at the beginning of lockdown, our chief exec was attending our regular meetings with other chief execs. So I think some of the techniques people are talking about today, that's been rolled out in our organisation as well. So there has been that sort of consolidation of ideas and pulling together, which is again reassuring. Just going further again, I think we're all perhaps at a stage where we're thinking about how sustainable all this is now, because our organisation will not go back to working how we did. We won't be going back to working in the offices. There's no longer an allocated desk that you could call your own. It will never happen again. So that was quite perhaps a shock to a lot of our staff. Within our organisation, it was perhaps being thought about making our staff more agile and not having to be office based. And the pandemic brought this forward a little bit quicker than perhaps our chief exec was thinking, but certainly that's the way it's going within our organisation. It's agile working, out and about. If you can pick up a signal by going into a coffee shop, as long as you can work securely, then they're encouraging people to be out and about on patches. And obviously you've got the home working contract change that we're now going through. But also there will be opportunities to go to the office, and I'm not sure if others will be working in this way, where you have to pre-book a desk that you can use, and they're encouraging you to go in just one day a week, and it'd be a bit like booking your seat at the cinema. We go in and select the desk that we want to use. So, lots of changes, and I think, in some ways, regardless of where we are in the country, we all seem to be sort of heading in the same direction of working remotely, working agilely. But again, reassuring from my point of view that we're in perhaps similar positions that a lot of others are. So just really some thoughts putting out there. So, and if you want to borrow my idea of Hoi Bingo, because I should be borrowing the alphabet challenge and making team meetings equally, as exciting, and keeping the interest and the focus there. But no, great. Thanks ever so much for putting this on today.
I think we definitely take up your offer on learning more about Hoi Bingo. It sounds fascinating, Karen. I'm going to pass back to Catherine or Jodie. Would either of you like to respond?
Yeah, no, just to say thank you for that. And I think you're right that the other thing that has happened is that we've realised how much it is possible to talk to people in other areas and share those experiences across perhaps boundaries that we wouldn't have done previously. We wouldn't have thought to put this presentation out to anyone who was interested, really. It would have been within our little group. So it's great to have these sort of opportunities that have come along with it as well. I don't know, Andrew, have you seen the comment from Carey Hill about Shelter Cymru's Take Notice project? I just thought that was interesting for people who are interested in learning a bit about that toolkit that was done with Conwy as well. Yeah, that's all from me.
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Karen, to you for your observations. But just building really on what Karen said, because I think you did touch upon the new ways of working. You don't want to go revert back really, and what does the new way of working look like? Just a question for you, Catherine, around how do we future-proof the best practice, the learning that has come from this research? What's your view on that?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting kind of angle on it, isn't it, really? Because I think one of the things I really took away from it was that we weren't ready at all. We weren't ready for this to happen. The fact that the amazing things happened is absolutely down to lots of very dedicated individuals, turning things around overnight. And that's in terms of helping people get into homes, helping people stay in their homes, but also, the kind of back office, getting all the digital stuff to work and all of that kind of those avenues as well that people have, done amazing things. So how do we make sure we don't have that kind of a shock again, I suppose, isn't it really, is how we future-proof. So how are we preparing for these kinds of things to happen? And, I think Welsh Government are doing some really interesting work around climate change, those kind of things. It'd be interesting to see what else they're doing about learning from this. How do we get this kind of response in a way that's more consistent and we're more readier for it, I think would be my reflections on it, really, making sure that those messages are being shared up and down kind of the line.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'm going to open it up. I haven't got anyone indicating. Is there anybody that wants to share anything, comment on the report, any experiences? Carey?
I've literally only just worked out how to raise my hand in Teams, otherwise I would have done it sooner. So sorry for coming in at the last minute. I just want to thank everybody for sharing, because first of all, obviously it's so interesting to hear everybody else's perspectives, but equally it's interesting to hear so much of what Catherine and Jodie say echoes the work that we did in partnership with Conwy Housing Solutions here in Shelter Cymru back at the end of last year. One thing that hasn't been mentioned by anybody, and I think is really important for us all to sort of take away from these kind of discussions, and did come up in our research, was the fact that with frontline housing officers working from home, they're inviting a lot of vicarious trauma into their households. And it might well be in your report, Catherine, sorry, I haven't actually had a chance to read it yet. But it was quite a strong theme in our research that without those normal coping mechanisms of having your colleagues at the next desk, and you come off a really difficult phone call, which perhaps it might have been aggressive, it might have been upsetting, that's something very, very new that staff have had to cope with. And in the early days of lockdown, when everybody was literally locked down and you had small children in your household, perhaps, or perhaps you live on your own, so you had nobody immediately to support you if you'd had a really difficult scenario to deal with. I think that was just an additional topic that came up in our research that wasn't mentioned today.
Thank you. That's a really important part, actually. You know, staff wellbeing is something that I think all local authorities are going to be really focused on at the moment and post-pandemic, and probably for quite some time as well. I think, you know, there's a worry that, you know, staff will experience trauma. You build up relationships with tenants, and then if tenants have passed away, there's that loss as well. Yeah, it's not to be underestimated, and I'm really pleased for you raising it today. Catherine, do you want to respond to that, or Jodie?
I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it didn't come up. People didn't directly mention that as a factor, but what, you know, there was a real, like, I think we brought up the fact that people felt under pressure from work, and that they felt that could well be the fact that they were having to manage that work within their own home, absolutely, and dealing with difficult situations and their own sort of. Certainly people identified the worry about keeping themselves and their staff and tenants who they work with safe from COVID as well. So I totally agree with you, and I think that's where that need for the mental health support all comes in, that those whole new experiences that people have had to deal with, as you say, potentially on their own or in a stressful home environment, and that needs to be part of the whole recovery process.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to open it up just in case there is anybody on the call who can't raise their hand but has got a question or a comment. No. Okay, so it just remains then for closing remarks and to bring this webinar to an end. Firstly, can I thank you both again, Catherine and Jodie, for, you know, excellent presentations and really thought-provoking, actually, and thank you to the audience, to the members participating, for all your you know, your comments and experiences. I think everybody's going to be playing bingo or having cream teas or going through the alphabet. I think we could see some different ways of working moving forward, but some really innovative ideas to bring teams back closer together and help tackle that isolation during a very, very difficult time. So the report, if you haven't seen it, will be made available again to you. This session has been recorded. The recording will be shared with you, and also the presentation slides. Just remains for me to thank you all for attending. Thank you to our speakers, and everybody stay safe during these troubled times, and take care. Thank you very much.